Hello, everybody.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I saw that.
If you can mute yourself, that would be wonderful. Otherwise, I'm going to mute you.
Okay, thanks. Bye. Hi, Amy.
Okay. Hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our last What's the Buzz monthly chat of 2024. This is so exciting. If you're here on Zoom or LinkedIn Live, welcome to our last What's the Buzz. We're just giving it a couple seconds to let people in. There might be a little delay on my part. For some reason, my internet is a little weird or wonky right now, so I apologize for that. But welcome to the monthly chat series. If you're not familiar with What's the Buzz, it is a monthly chat series, the second Tuesday of every month at 4 o'clock Eastern time here on Zoom and LinkedIn Live. For 20 minutes, we have a guest come and speak to us about a certain topic, trends, tips and tricks, industry, expert advice, all the things. So welcome to our last one of 2024. And yes, we will continue these in 2025. So with that, I am going to get things going and we'll get started since we do only have 20 minutes. But welcome again to our What's the Buzz monthly chat series. I'm so excited to have Yooz here, and we have Alastair here, and we're talking about the easiest way to reconcile vendor statements. And what's the best way to do that? Automate it with the new feature, Yooz Vendor Statements. So it's going to be the end of manual process madness with effortless automated vendor statement reconciliation. So we have Alastair here joining us to talk all about this awesome, amazing feature and help you make things easier, because who doesn't want to do that? So welcome, Alastair.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. I'm the just going to mute the volumes. Small feedback. Hi, everyone. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager over here at Yooz, and wanted to talk about a new feature that we've released this year that I think exemplifies a digital transformation and AP automation solution that a lot of AP teams and accounting teams face when they have specific manual pain point tasks and processes that they deal with on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, and that can help them solve specific pain points and issues and challenges that they experience in a really kind of simple, intuitive, and automated way. So I think what I'm going to do is start sharing my screen. And we are going to check that everybody had a slight technical issue earlier. I'm hoping everybody sees my screen just fine. So what I'm doing is I'm now sharing. Can I just get someone to give him emote or yes, they're seeing my screen just fine? Yeah, and hopefully not with any extreme delay. Okay. I mean, so I'm gonna push forward, guys. If you are not seeing anything or seeing black, just let us know, and then we'll go from there. But I'm hoping everybody's seeing this. This is the intro slide. So basically, we're going to be talking about how to effortlessly automate vendor statement reconciliation through Yooz vendor statements. And I think before we talk about how, I wanted to talk about what vendor statement reconciliation is. So what AP teams have to deal with when they're dealing with vendor statement reconciliation. All the process is checking that a vendor balance in the accounts payable ledger and the AP ledger matches a statement issued by a vendor. And what that looks like is typically a vendor or a supplier sending in a statement. That statement will typically be a summary of outstanding invoices, credits, charges, discounts, among other things, and it's received as a PDF, or it might be in other document formats, and sometimes it's even received as paper, and they can be very data-heavy, dense documents that span hundreds, if not thousands of lines and transactions, and can be upwards of 30 or 40 pages long. The AP team then typically matches and checks that statement against their AP ledger, and that means printing it out. It's surprising how many teams, we had a webinar a few hours ago, and a few of the customer attendees said that 85% of them still reconcile vendor statements manually. So it's an insanely high amount of manual reconciliation that's still being done. And that involves printing out pages upon pages of documents. It then involves going through and doing manual checking that those invoice numbers, amounts, due dates, and everything else match, often with a highlighter. I'm not exaggerating. You tape together highlighters and running through manually line by line still gets done. And they then investigate and note any discrepancies. They then go ahead and do the reconciliation part. That involves the investigation. So any discrepancies that are then done get summarized within a document, statuses get noted, discrepancies get noted, and they email off a summary to the supplier or to the vendor. So why is that a headache? It's going to be somewhat self-evident, but it's a headache because vendor statements contain within them a high volume of data and lines and transactions. There's format variability across the way that they are received. The discrepancies are very difficult to pick up, and because all of that is being done in a manual way still, they're being processed in a manual way, that means the entire task is very resource intensive, it's very complex, it requires a great attention to detail, and it sucks up a whole lot of time that teams just don't want to be spending. The last part of the equation is supplier communication. So because it's very manual, because it's complex, it means a lot of redundant communication is spent between the AP team and the suppliers, disagreeing about things, dealing with ambiguity or not knowing which documents are being recorded, or if there are discrepancies, not being able to resolve them very quickly and efficiently in a timely manner, which of course the last thing that AP teams want to be doing is spending unnecessary communication time dealing with and resolving issues from the suppliers. So let's talk about different AP team scenarios. So from the perspective of different AP teams, they approach this challenge of manual vendor statement reconciliation in different ways. Some teams, and this is not the majority, don't reconcile any of their vendor statements at all. Some reconcile 100% of their vendor statements manually, and they spend a lot of time and effort doing it because it's important to them from an audit perspective to show that they have a robust audit trail across all of the documents, and because their vendor relationship management is very, very important to them. I think most teams fall within this third category, and that's doing partial prioritized reconciliation. In almost all of these cases, it's still a headache to do. And for partial and prioritized reconciliation, teams are making that decision based on the size of their vendors, whether they've received requests from their specific vendors to do reconciliation, the relationship, of course, that they have with their vendors, and the time that they have available to them. I would say that every single one of these different AP team types can benefit from Yooz vendor statements. So what does effortless statement reconciliation look like? Well, the goal is to have inbound statements coming in a very omni-channel, multi-format type. So it doesn't matter whether you're receiving it as a PDF, whether you're scanning it as images, that document can be collected and the data can then be extracted from it and collected within the system. From there, we want to automatically match those statements to a number of different document types within the system. So a vendor statement is going to be matched to invoices, credit notes, payment pending within the system. From there, of course, matching, that by itself, being able to automatically match documents to multiple lines within statements is going to save an immense amount of time, but it's only the first step of the process. The next step of the process is being able to intelligently identify where discrepancies are taking place. So we want to be able to identify if there are missing invoices, duplicate invoices, discrepant invoice amounts, a number of different criteria around discrepancies that enables the AP team to then generate a very quick summary to make sure that the vendor knows exactly what's missing, what discrepancies were detected, and then reconcile the statement. So the way that we like to think of it is for the users who are going to be primarily AP clerks and managers, this tool allows them to reconcile complex statements at scale. It allows them to reduce the amount of manual tasks that they're going through, typically from hours to minutes. It's going to be able to them to catch discrepancies and reduce fraud risk as well. You're going to be able to reduce late payment because you're identifying upcoming late payments and penalties through accurate vendor statement reconciliation. And at the end of the day, this is a tool through which you can use to improve vendor relationship management. For controllers, accounting directors, at a higher level, CFOs, what do they care about at the end of the day? Accurate forecasting, decreased close times, really optimizing the processes and the company overall in terms of performance and efficiency, and improving audit process insight, all of which vendor statement reconciliation and automated vendor statement reconciliation can allow them to do. So I wanted to get through that. Let's jump into a demo and take a look at what it looks like. Let me just bear with me as I am going to I ended up closing my, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, guys, so I can bring on. Bear with me, we're going to be sharing again soon as we apologies. Getting up my documents. Here we go. Okay, let me share the screen now. All right. So I should be sharing my screen again right now. We're going to enter the Yooz application here. You should see it. There should be a, hopefully it should, what's it showing right there, Amy? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I tell you what, it should be sharing it now. All right, technical issues abound. It's all good. All right, so Amy, just to double check that you're seeing that. Okay. You see? All right. All right, since we're going through the technical issues, Zubin, can I just double check you're seeing that? Call out someone on the chat. Okay, fantastic. All right. So right now we're in the Yooz application. And what we're looking at is the capture component of the Yooz application. This is where we're going to, of course, the end users are going to be capturing a lot of their different documents. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how we capture a vendor statement into the platform. So typically, a lot of end users are going to be using email capture to capture a lot of their emails. What I'm going to do is I've got a document here that I'm going to drag and drop over because we have multiple different channels for capture within the application. And what we're going to do is we're going to capture a vendor statement specific document. We have lots of different document types in Yooz. And what we're going to do is we're going to select the vendor statement document and we're going to import. As that's starting to import, you can see that down here at the bottom, that document is now in the process of being captured and being imported. Before we actually take a look at the vendor statement itself, I wanted to talk about the importance of customizability when it comes to workflows and preferences within different types of applications. Vendor statements, we have a lot of different customizable workflows for different types of document types within Yooz, and vendor statements are no exception. So if I click into the vendor statement, you'll notice something interesting here. We can see that the vendor statement reconciliation process begins and ends at the review stage. That's because for most teams, they don't necessarily need approval, parallel approval, or payment steps for their vendor statement reconciliation workflows. That's because for the majority of them, it's the most important thing is to identify and match and align at the very beginning of the process what documents exist within their system, reconcile them with the vendor statement, and then that's where it ends. However, if teams do need multiple stages of review, either parallel review, approval, or even to push a document, a vendor statement through to the payment phase so that one of the payment approvers can review, say, a late payment line on the vendor statement and then approve from there, it's completely customizable for your team's processes or for certain specific AP team's processes. What I'm going to do is I am going to impersonate our accountant now. So I have my accountant in here that I'm going to impersonate, and we're going to go over to our tasks. And you can see I've got two documents here. Right here on the bottom, this is the vendor statement that we have just imported and captured. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up. And just like a lot of documents in Yooz, this layout is going to be familiar perhaps to some of you on the call. We can see our image statement just like we would see an invoice image or a PO image on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, we have our property header details. So this is information and data that has been extracted and captured from the document. We can see that the statement date has been pulled and assigned. The third party and vendor name has been pulled and assigned, as has the customer number, as has the total amount from the statement. However, there are some distinct and unique differences for vendor statements that are very different from invoices or POs or purchase requests. That is the invoice list. So if I drag this up, you can see that there is a whole list of documents. These are documents that have been pulled from the vendor statement, identified from document number, searched within the system, analyzed, and then linked, as we can see on the invoice list side. So we have the invoice number, we have the invoice, the Yooz invoice details, excuse me, the third column along. And when I say the third column along in my layout, this is the third column. However, this entire interface is completely customizable. Rows can be changed, columns can be changed, removed, altered, so to the preference for the individual user. So on this column, we have the total amount pulled from the statement. That's the amount that we see here. And we also have the total amount of the document. That is the amount of the document that we've linked, that has been identified and linked from within the system. The next column we have, and this is probably one of the most interesting and important ones, is the matching column. So what the system has done is it has tried to identify whether a match has been attained based on a number of key criteria. Some of the key criteria are vendor name, document date, amount, and if there is a match, if all of those things correspond, the system creates an automatic match. This by itself eliminates a huge amount of time just from printing out and having to match and check line by line what is listed within the vendor statement, and not having an automated way of doing it. This automates the entire matching process. Before we go into mismatches, I also wanted to talk about the next column along, and that's the task column. So this shows where each specific document may be in relation to a specific task. Is it an approval? Is it waiting for payment confirmation? Is it in review? The column after that is payment remittance. So if payment has been remitted for a specific document, it shows whether payment has been remitted. Likewise, if a document has been blocked for any reason, it shows, like we can see down here, it shows that that document has been blocked. We also have a column showing the due dates of those respective documents. But automatic matching, as we talked about in the beginning, is only half the battle. And the second part of the automation side of it, and the intelligence side, is identifying where discrepancies are taking place. And so if I go down this matching column here, you can see that we've gone, let's talk about this first discrepancy that we get here, which is a mismatch that's occurring from a different amount. And as you can see, we've got if we go all the way to the bottom, actually, I don't need to do that because we can see the balances. We see our two balances here don't match. So immediately, if you were an AP clerk going through this, the first thing you see is, okay, first thing I know is the balances don't match. So somewhere there is a mismatch between what the vendor statement and the vendor sent in and what exists within our system. This is incredibly vital information to have. And the first thing that we see is the total, well, one of the first things we see is there's a mismatch over here because it occurs from a different amount. Now, it could occur from a whole variety of things, but here it's a different amount. And so we know that this is something the AP clerk would need to go back to the vendor to ask for in their vendor statement summary. So this is helping identify where the mismatch or the discrepancy is occurring. And now that the AP clerk would typically want to go and communicate with the vendor. And there's three different ways that we do that. A lot of teams just go back to their Outlook client or the email client and they send an email to the vendor. The other thing that that users can do is email the vendor directly from within the application. So all you do is you hit email. You would then type in the vendor's email, add a subject line, and then you would say, hi, document number, doc number, and then is incorrect amount, and then supply new number, something like that. They also have the ability to attach any and all of the documents identified and linked from within the vendor statement. There's a third option that a lot of our customers and users use, and that is the ability to directly or tag a vendor from within the vendor statement. So if you have added a vendor to the external access feature within Yooz, which is a free-to-use feature for all users, what you would do is you would click on this add comment. Whilst you're adding a comment, you would at the vendor, and you would say, hi, and let's actually copy this document that's discrepant. Let's copy that. Let me go hi. Invoice, paste that, has an incorrect amount. Please check, right? And once that's sent off to the vendor, what I'll do is I'll impersonate the vendor's perspective for a second so we can see what it looks like from their point of view. So we're going to select a vendor user. We're going to go in. And as you can see, the notification bell at the top right-hand side of the screen, if I click on that, you can see that we've received a notification. And if we click more, we can see hi, invoice 1689017 has an incorrect amount, and they can then click on that to go check it, but this is enough usually for them to know, okay, hey, we need to go back and immediately check. So it's a streamlined channel of communication. It makes things just simpler from the customer's perspective, both in terms of automating the process as well as communicating with the vendor. I'm going to open that document back up from the accountant's perspective, and that's really it. It's a very simple but powerful and straightforward to use feature that addresses a pain point that I think is painfully lacking from a lot of users who are still having to deal with manual reconciliation, vendor statement reconciliation, because even if they have AP processes in place, automated AP processes in place, they often lack specific processes for vendor statement reconciliation. From what we can, from what we can tell from our perspective, it's something that a lot of them can use, and I'll give you, questions that we've had, and maybe we'll get into the Q&A, any kind of Q&A. Some questions are, okay, fair enough. Vendor statement reconciliation, this can maybe speed it up a little bit. This can help us automate it. But what real benefits are we going to experience from using a feature like this? And Amy, I'm not sure if I'm okay to go into kind of some of those questions, or maybe we just leave it there, but we can talk about it. But what I'll do is I'll stop there before kind of launching into any of that, so we can leave it open for questions, and then we'll But that concludes a lot of the main gist of this feature.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Alastair, for joining us for What's the Buzz. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, put it in the Q&A. If not, obviously, you can also reach out to us afterwards, and we can certainly get back to you on that. But I'm so glad that you joined us for our last What's the Buzz of 2024. And don't worry, we'll keep these going in 2025 every month to bring you some buzzworthy information on various topics, tips and tricks, industry trends, and so forth. So we truly do appreciate you being here every time. Oh, we got a question. How would the Yooz system handle differences like a prefix versus the document being processed?
So that's a great question around the prefix, although I'm not sure how it relates to the document being processed. I'm not sure. Ben, I'd appreciate a little bit of context around.
And Ben, you can unmute yourself if you want to.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so the question, and apologies, I was trying to write it a little shorthand, but for instance, lots of vendors, at least when we utilize Yooz, we'll put like a prefix or a store number or whatever on their documents. When we process it through, we kind of let Yooz naturally read it, and sometimes it drops that prefix, right? So it'll drop the store number, it'll just give us the order number or the invoice number. So the question really is, okay, well, if I get a statement from the vendor and it's got that prefix on it with the store number, is Yooz matching smart enough to be able to say, yeah, this invoice 123 that we process through Yooz on the invoicing side, is that going to match up to the statement side when it's maybe got store 5, invoice 123? That makes sense.
It absolutely does make sense, and yeah. So the so yeah, I've got getting a bit of feedback here. Okay. So Ben, absolutely does make sense, and I'm glad I understood it properly. Just I wasn't sure if I was understanding the document being processed. Okay, so yeah, really relevant, because one thing that we discovered when we were developing and testing and researching the feature is exactly that. It's a huge issue if what we're relying on is documents being identified and linked within a vendor statement, which can be very large documents, are not at the end of the day linked, because a document being referenced on a vendor statement might have a alphanumeric prefix or suffix, and the document that's already in the system doesn't, then a match isn't going to occur. And the last thing we want is a user opening a vendor statement and having nothing on that invoice list. Just that's the last thing we want. So one of the things that we worked on, and this will be reflected over more and more document types, and it's reflected in vendor statements right now, is what we call smart matching. So if, for example, as you were giving Ben, the vendor statement includes an alphanumeric prefix or suffix that is different, that makes the document number different than the original document number, for example. What we're going to do, or the other way around, what the system does is it picks up a partial. So it'll pick up the partial number. It will then search the system, and it'll find the partial. Now, we also don't want to be matching document numbers from different vendors as well. That's not something we want to be doing. But what we then do is we compare the amounts. Is the amount the same? The amount the same? Good. Is the vendor the same? The vendor the same? Good. And then we go over a couple of different criteria of matching. And if the smart match has a relatively high degree of confidence, then we match the document. So we retain the number. So we retain that confidence in the match. Does that answer your question, Ben?
It does, yeah. It was just having those false positives come through of on the statement, not on not in Yooz, right. And then in Yooz, not on the statement kind of concept. Yeah. So chasing those differences, I think, is key when it comes to utilizing software to do these routes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you. Okay, any other questions? If not, again, thank you so much for joining us for What's the Buzz this month, and hope to see you in January 2025. So happy holidays, happy new year. Thanks, everyone.